Radio Cardiff
98.7 FM. You're listening to news, views and interviews on Radio Cardiff.
Good afternoon, you're listening to News, Views and Interviews on Radio Cardiff 98.7 FM. I'm Jane Morris and I'm very pleased to say I'm joined today by Councillor Russell Goodway. Hi.
Hi.
How are you doing today?
Good to be here. Apologise to your listeners for my voice. It's council budget day, and I don't know what it is, but every year I seem to lose my voice on budget day. Right. Most people wish I'd lose my voice a lot more often, but there you are.
Okay then. Right, well obviously we're here to talk about the budget. I tell you, I don't know where to start, but we've already had a questioning because I've got so many questions for you, so I'll go with their question first if that's okay.
Okay.
This comes in from a listener. It says, why is the council using the threat of closing Splot Pool to try and blackmail people into accepting the closure of the Star and East Moors Community Centre to be replaced by a single inferior leisure hub? And that's from Ross Saunders, from the Save Splot Pool campaign committee member.
Okay. Well, we're not threatening anybody with anything. The position that we have found ourselves in, we took office last May following the county council elections, and one of the things that has been identified is that Splot Pool is coming to the end of its useful life, and some of the buildings and the plant there, the equipment that's used to heat the water, is coming to the end of its life and will need replacing. Mm-hmm. And the replacement, as you can imagine, costs a significant amount of money, which at the moment the council doesn't have. So the service area initially felt, well, there's not a great deal that we can do on our own. They didn't have spare cash in order to do that, so they put the proposal forward as a saving. But I have to say, the three Splot councillors, who are very creative, young people who've got some good ideas, came forward and said, well, look, is there a way that we can save facilities in Splot for the needs of the people if we combine certain sort of facilities that we've already got, so you can cut the overhead and release the resource in order to improve the actual facility? And that's what we've committed to look at this time.
Right, so you're talking about the proposed leisure hub that's coming to Splot.
We're looking at, I'm not going to say what anything until I speak to the council this afternoon. I mean, my responsibility is to make my party's proposals available to the council first, and then they'll be in the public domain. But it is no secret that we're looking across the city at reducing the number of council buildings, because we've got something like 196 different buildings across the city, and all of them are expensive to keep. I mean, anybody that runs a house or a business will know how much the property costs are and the overheads of maintaining buildings. So if we can bring various activities under one roof, like a library or an advice centre, a housing office, if you bring them all under one roof, you've only got one overhead. You've got one building to look after instead of several. And we're going to be looking over the course of the next 4 years at how we can rationalise council buildings so we can get more from the asset. In other words, we've got to sweat the asset. And that's just what anybody would have to do, any individual would have to do, in their household expenditure if they were facing a reduction in their income. And we know that between now and 2017, we're going to have to spend, in real terms, something like £80 million less than we're spending now.
But would it be correct to say that we'll call it the proposed leisure hub because that's what everyone else is calling it and we know what we're talking about, that was something that was come up with in response to the proposed budget cuts, rather than it being a long-term plan by the council that goes back months or even years?
Well, as I say, we looked at if you're talking about Splot Pool in particular, one of the things that we looked at was what's the usage of the pool compared to other pools in the city, because there's a pool at Eastern Leisure Centre, Western Leisure Centre, and there's the one now down at the Bay, and people tend to vote with their feet. People tend to go where they most want to be, and when we first of all looked at the proposal, we thought, well, how can we sustain this facility? How can we get, will more people use it if we were able to combine it with something else? And therefore we felt, well, if you've got a hub, if you've got a place where everybody goes, the chances are you increase the footfall to the hub. And therefore, people make more use of the facilities or the activities that go on in that hub. And as I say, this isn't specific to Splot. We're doing it in Ely. We're doing it in Llanrumney. Across the city, we're looking at ways where we can get more activities under one roof so that we can cut our overheads.
Mm-hmm. But you didn't answer my specific question. I asked whether it was an idea that's come up recently in the last few weeks, or whether it's something the council's been planning in Splot for a long time.
The specific proposal around Splot came from the 3 ward councillors. I mean, as I say, they're really good young people. They've got fantastic ideas, and they said, well, hang on a minute, you're doing these hubs in other parts of the city. Is there a possibility that we could do that in Splot? And we felt, well, it's worth having a look at. Let's see whether we can bring forward some proposals. That's maybe what we say we're going to do this afternoon.
Mm-hmm. In relation to that, I want to ask you about the Star Centre, because that's not mentioned at all in the budget.
No.
Yet, when there was a public meeting there a couple of weeks ago, it was announced that was going to be closed down, to so many people's shock and horror. What exactly are your plans for the Star Centre at the moment?
Well, as I said, I'm not going to announce my plans on the radio until after I've had an opportunity to speak to the council.
But it's not part of the budget, though, is it? It's not part of the proposed budget.
Well, I'm not going to announce our plans to the radio before I've had a chance to speak to the council. But all of our leisure centres pose a challenge to us in the period going forward. As I say, between now and 2017, we've got to get ourselves into a position where we are spending, in real terms, something like £80 million less than we're spending this year. And when you consider that there are some things that we can't stop spending on, we can't stop spending on schools, and nobody would want us to. We can't stop spending on social services, and nobody would want us to. We've got a situation where the elderly population is growing, and they're very expensive to look after, and we have to do our best for them. We've got an increasing number of children in our care that we have to look after. So there isn't many places where we can go to make those cuts. And therefore, in areas like leisure, we've got to see how we can provide those facilities or work with partners to provide those facilities in the future. Because the important thing is the activity continues, that people have access to those activities, rather than where they are or who's running them.
I mean, I'm glad you mentioned that there, that the activity continues, because, well, first of all, I want to say about the Star Centre, I want to say one of the best things the council did in Splot, as far as the Star Centre is concerned, is incorporating the library in there. It has been a massive success. I my family use it all the time, and I love to go in there because it is full of kids and young people, and I think it's amazing that they're happy to hang out in there, because if they're not in there, they're going to be wandering the streets. So, the Star Centre is a really good thing. But if, I know it's all up in the air, you're probably not going to answer my question, but if, all the plans come together and there's going to be this wonderful leisure hub that incorporates everything in Splot, why can't the existing facilities, i.e. Splot Pool and Star Centre, stay open at least until you're coming to groundbreaking and actually building it?
Well, if we're going to build, if we do end up building on the site of Splot Pool, you couldn't keep the pool open while you were building, could you?
Obviously not. But that was the question.
Yeah.
Why can't it be kept open up until such times as all the plans are in position, the developers are there, the builders are about to start?
Hold the front page and see what I say this afternoon.
Right. Okay, then. Well, that is going to be... I'm going to keep it.
I'm sorry to be evasive. But
Well, I don't know. Are you giving us hope or what? I don't know. That will remain to be seen.
Well, it's not the mouth it comes out of, it's the ears it goes into, really, as to whether people leave City Hall this afternoon feeling that they've been given some comfort. But I intend to be pretty straight and direct to the community. I mean, this isn't a change of mind. It could be a change of heart, but it's not a change of mind. We've got to do something really creative, and we've got to come together. The community has to come together and give commitments as well as the council if we're going to succeed.
Have you been surprised by the strength of feeling, not only with Splot Pool, but of I can't remember how many cuts there are. I haven't actually mentioned that. I haven't actually counted them, but there's rather a lot. But
hundreds.
Yeah. Have you been surprised at the strength of feeling?
No, not at all. Not at all. It goes with the territory. there is a saying, you can't please all the people all of the time, and some people you can't
You're not
please any of the
pleasing
time.
a lot of people at the moment.
Anybody that's impacted by a cut is going to be imposed to it, and even sometimes when it isn't a cut, people react very badly. I mean, it's amazing, isn't it? That the supporters of Splot Pool, some of them have said, well, if it's because it's running at a deficit, why don't you increase the charges? And you say, okay, well, let's do some number crunching on that and see whether it would work. You've got other areas where you're saying, well, we're not going to cut the service at all, but we're going to increase the charges, and you get the same reaction from users of that service saying this is disgraceful, increasing charges, and we've had the stories this week about charging, for the use of football pitches for seniors. I mean, we've made a commitment that people under 18 won't have to pay at all to use those facilities, but people over 18 will have to pay an additional £2.50 a week each. But they're still reacting. There's still big headlines about people saying that this is a bad thing, that this ought not to be happening. But you can't please all the people all the time, and as you say, it seems this week that you can't please anybody any of the time. Mm-hmm. But when they settle back and see what it is we're trying to put in place and look at the measures that we're putting forward in the round, protecting our children, protecting our old people, looking after our schools, giving them more money to spend, then some of the sacrifices we're asking people to make, in perspective, are not that great. But they will get greater, because there are more cuts ahead. Unless we get a change in government policy, then we're going to have to keep making these cuts. 22 million this year, 25 million next year, 20-odd million the year after.
Mm-hmm. Well, one other thing, actually, you are a councillor and you are elected to represent the people in your constituency.
That's right.
So how do you feel when your constituents don't like what you're doing? Do you feel some sort of, well, maybe I should actually be representing their views rather than my own?
Well, a lot of us say we weren't elected to do some of the things that we're being forced to do today. But it's just like, I can only explain it, it's like running your household. If you know that your income is going to go down from £100 a week to £80 a week over the next year, then you've got to do something about that. You've got to decide what it is you're going to go without. And sometimes, just like in families, where people, in order to heat the house, they go without food, or in order to have food, they don't keep themselves warm. The council's not in a dissimilar situation, that we've got responsibilities to people that we have to provide, and we can't always provide them because we don't have enough money to do that. And yes, it does bring us into conflict with the people that send us to City Hall, but I believe that my contract is with the people. I believe that they've entrusted me with the responsibility to look ahead, to understand what the future challenges are, and to make the right decisions at the right time to protect their future. And if that means that in the immediate term, some people are going to have to be unhappy, and some people, in fact, are going to have to struggle, I think most people will, in the round, reflect and say, well, okay, if I was doing that in my household, I would have to be making some similar tough decisions. And I just hope that they will understand.
I mean, I can, from that point of view, yes, I can understand. We're all paying a lot more and getting a lot less coming in. Yes, you do have to make hard decisions. Yeah. But, I mean, some of the things that you have cut funding to, I'm going to pick one of the many charities, and it's Women Connect First, which is based in Riverside. They only had a grant of less than £10,000, and yet that's been completely taken away. But yet this is a charity that helps over about 1,000 women a year find work. Surely by cutting that £10,000, it's a false economy, because if those 1,000 women a year aren't in work, they're going to be on benefits, which is also going to be a drain off the council because they're possibly on housing benefit, etc. So surely that is a false economy.
Well, let me make it clear that no decision has been made to cut that particular grant. Mm-hmm. The decision was made by, in previous years, to give a grant for 3 years. and then it was extended twice for 1 year because my understanding, and I've seen the paperwork on that particular one only this morning as it happens, the grant was given for to assist with the rent of a property. And my understanding is that now Welsh Government has come in and has bought the property and is providing the property for them. So they don't need the money for the rent anymore. But we didn't decide to cut the grant. The grant has expired. It was given for a period of time, and that period of time has now ended. Now, if you want grant assistance from the council for a purpose other than the one that it's given, then that's got to be the subject of a fresh application. You can't just carry on writing a cheque for an expense that the organisation is no longer incurring.
Okay.
Because if they're not paying rent, you can't give them a grant to pay the rent, can you?
No.
You see what I mean?
Yeah, that's fair enough. But it just seemed that, there was quite is something about 800 charities or something, is it?
There's a huge number of
charities. So you can't know specifics,
but there are there's a distinction too. There are some charities that, I'm not sure I should mention them on air, but I will. Age Concern, for instance, they actually deliver services for the council that we pay them to deliver services that we would otherwise have to deliver ourselves. But there are other charities that we just give a grant towards their activities for them to spend as they would like. And you'll appreciate that in difficult times like now, we have to focus on providing money to those organisations that do work for us, that if they weren't doing it, we would have to create a capability within the council to do that work ourselves. And therefore, it would either cost the same or maybe even cost more. It's when we're helping individual charities to do their own thing that we're having the difficulty at the moment in finding the money.
Okay. I did actually have a quick look through. I've got a printout of all the different things, and there were a few things that I did actually agree with. You may be surprised to hear.
No, I'm not. You're not alone.
There were a few things. I mean, one of the things, it's like, okay, the big weekend, it is a little bit of a luxury for Cardiff, so stopping the money for that, I can see the point of that. But then, on the other hand, thinking about it again, it does bring an awful lot of business into the city. It brings thousands of people into the city, a lot of whom will come back and visit later on in the year. So, some of them are a bit like that. Run Mansion House as a commercial operation, no problem with that at all. The floral displays, I'm allergic to flowers, so they don't bother me in the least. But one of the things I did think of as far as, parks and that is concerned, because I know a lot of the floral displays, they are annuals and they're changed over quite regularly, so they change the displays. Why can't you just have perennials in there? So, you're just maintaining the plants rather than changing them every year. Or if you are going to be digging up the plants, why don't you sell them off instead? Because I know a lot of these stuff still goes to landfill.
Well, now you're talking to the wrong person, and you're talking about perennials and gardening and the like, I have to say.
Perennials are the plants that just grow
every year.
Grow every year.
I don't know the answer to that question, to be perfectly honest, but it's something that's worthy of reflection. But let me take you back to the big weekend. I mean, it was rested last year, if you like, for the purposes of the Olympics.
Yes.
The feeling is that the event in its existing form had become a bit tired and perhaps needs a bit of rejuvenation. My feeling is that what we ought to try to do is to see whether we can get some sort of commercial interest in delivering the big weekend as a project, and instead of people perhaps having free entry into the big weekend, perhaps we could start to make a small charge, and that would fund itself. And I think we need to look more creatively at things like that. That things don't have to stop completely, but it may be that we have to run them in a more business-like and in a more commercial way, and perhaps get a commercial partner alongside us to make sure that operates. And you make a good point that some of these events are good for the city because they bring footfall in and people are spending money in the shops and the restaurants, the bars. Now it may be that if we have a proper conversation with the business community, that they may feel that if we organised it, they would invest some money in making sure the event went ahead because it's in their interest to do. And that's why we would like to create a business council so we can have a proper conversation, an ongoing conversation with the business community to see what we can achieve together. Because you're right, what what we're in business to do is to try and keep the activity, rather than just keep the same old going on without it changing.
Okay. One of the other things that from corporate services is basically good housekeeping, switching lights off, less paperwork. For example, I know if you've got all your computers on standby, it costs an absolute fortune in electricity. But why aren't you doing this already?
Well, we are in some buildings. I mean, if in County Hall, for instance, in the Bay, if you don't move, the lights go off. Now, I'm not going to say that they're never on, but if there hasn't been movement in the room for a period, the lights will go off. Now, we've got some older buildings, like City Hall, for instance, where the equipment isn't as modern. But we are looking to invest in those sorts of initiatives in order to reduce costs and to reduce overheads. Even looking at, getting dimmers on street lights that, at certain times of the night, instead of keeping them on the same power all night, that when you got to sort of like midnight, you could dim the street lights when there's not so much traffic.
Well, you can
around.
actually get street lights that are light activated, so they're not on a timer.
And I understand there's also a prospect of having LED lights, which are much cheaper to run. And I know the council is having a conversation with some Canadian outfit at the moment to see whether or not there's a prospect not just of having LED lights across the city, but getting an inward investor to come and locate in Cardiff that would produce the lights. So we've got a double whammy. So all those things are being thought about. It's just bringing them on stream and making them happen.
Okay, right. If there's anyone out there who's got any comments or any further questions, please drop us text on 07728 758 759, or you can call the hotline on 02920 235 664. Where shall we go to next? I'm going to go to education, because you did mention earlier that you're trying to safeguard education, put more money into schools and that, but the cuts that you are putting in, they seem to be at the, how shall I put it, almost in the areas that I would have thought would have needed more funding. For example, the deletion of the role of exclusion officers from pupil support services and behavioural support, getting rid of education psychology posts, and getting rid of 4 specialist teacher posts in pupil support in learning and intervention team, with pupils seem to be aimed at the children who we need to get back into education. So I can't see how cutting posts of people who are helping the most vulnerable children in Cardiff is going to achieve anything.
I fully understand how you would read that particular entry in the budget, but it's not quite like that. Government's decided that most of the money that's spent on schools should be under the control of schools themselves. And by 2015, 85% of the money that the government makes available for schools and the council makes available for schools has to be delegated to the control of the school governing body. So services at the moment that we deliver centrally and that we have the money for will have to be purchased by a school. So we won't be able to decide whether we deliver the service or not. The school will decide whether they want to buy the service or not. And because they've got control of the money, they can decide who they buy that service from. So they don't have to buy it from us. But we've no longer got the money. The money has gone to the school, and it's up to the school to decide. And as a result, people that we've previously employed to deliver the service are now at risk, because we can't guarantee that the schools will buy that service from us.
Okay.
All right, so the money's still there. And just to make the point, the Cardiff schools next year will get 4.9 million more than they're getting this year. And they're going to get 1.4 million more than they need to pay for inflation and pay rises for teachers and school staff. So there's a real terms increase in the amount of money that schools have to spend. Okay, so does that mean that these posts aren't going to be lost at all? They're just going to be funded from somewhere else, or will there be a transition period? It depends on what the schools choose. If the schools choose to buy that service from Cardiff, we can keep those staff. If the schools choose to buy that service from somewhere else, from another local authority or a private sector consortium, then the people that work for us will clearly be at risk.
Okay.
Okay.
We've got another question coming in, and we are rapidly running out of time, unfortunately. Actually, while that comes, wait a minute. Okay. It says, how can you justify such a conservative budget with a large C, slashing services for the poor when they when all you have to do is raise the council tax?
I think I can identify the person that sent that question in, to be perfectly honest. Well, it isn't a conservative budget at all. The only element of this budget that is conservative, Liberal Democrat, is the amount of money that we have available, because it's part of the austerity programme of the Westminster government to cut public spending, and we're just at the end of the line, and we're taking our share of that cut. And there's a debate about whether that cut is necessary, or whether there is a plan B that the government could operate that would invest more in public services and in public spending. But we are where we are. We know how much money we're going to have to spend, and we know what we have to spend it on. Mm-hmm. Yes, it is an option to increase council tax, but we've taken the view this year that, we've made the point before that households are struggling. Fuel bills are going up, energy bills are going up, the cost of food is going up. We feel that at some stage we've got to be on the side of those hard-working, hard-pressed families who are struggling to make ends meet. And if we can help by freezing the cost of school meals, if we can help by freezing council tax, then we feel that we're doing our part for hard-working, hard-pressed families to make ends meet at these difficult times. It's a choice. Some people would say, we're going to raise council tax and make people pay more. We're saying on this occasion that we feel that they need that break.
Okay. One of the other things that has come up, been thrown around, is the increase in the number of senior managers that's going to be costing, I think...
1.1 million.
Okay. I've heard 1.1, I've heard 1.3, I've heard 1.67, but over £1 million, that's a lot of money. Why do we need more managers?
Because we're spending £3.6 million at the moment. We inherited a situation last year where we were employing management consultants to manage the authority rather than staff under our own control that work for us. And would you believe that when we came to power, the council was employing somebody on £1,500 a day? That's at the rate of £500,000 a year. We were employing over 24 people on over £600 a day. And we said, well, look, it would be cheaper for us. We can save money if we employ these people directly, and they can probably do more for us. We'll get more from them if they're working as part of a team working for the council. And I think we've been vindicated in recent days, because the Wales Audit Office last week produced a report which said to the Welsh Government, look, you should stop using these consultants and you should be employing your own staff, because you will get more out of them. And I think that is a vindication of the decision that we are taking as part of this budget. And it would be false economy. If we didn't invest that 1.1 million, we would have to pay more for management consultants. And I can tell you that in this budget, as a result of taking that action, we're able to spend 1.6 million on other things. We are saving 1.6 million on the costs of managing the authority.
But okay, sorry, part of me, when you're saying that, I'm thinking, well, that is turning full circle on going back to previous Tory governments, whereby they changed it, whereas councils did everything in-house at one point, and then they had to put everything out to competitive tendering. And it's almost like you've realised that actually in a lot of cases that costs more money, and we've got to come back to doing it in-house again.
I think the country has recognised the folly of the Thatcher years, and the country has paid a big price for what we used to call competitive tendering, private finance initiatives, which have cost the council taxpayer an absolute fortune. We've learned those lessons, and we have to do things in a more traditional way. Now, that's not going back to do precisely what was happening 30 years ago, but in terms of managing difficult situations, you have to have qualified people to do it. And we need the best people in Cardiff. Don't forget that, after 8 years of the Liberal Democrat Plaid administration, we were in a situation where our schools were on the verge of special measures. We were in danger of losing control of our schools. Some of our social services, particularly children's services, were described by our advisors as dangerous. So we needed to get people in place that can manage these very difficult services in the most difficult of financial times in order to get things right. Now, if we can spend 1.1 million on getting a team of people that can help us achieve those outcomes and still save 1.6 million on the cost of management consultants, that's got to be good for the Cardiff Council taxpayer.
Right. We have actually run out of time, and I had so many things to come back to you on with that. Well, I'm going to say it anyway. I mean, for me, just specifically the children's services, social services, on that, if I know they are in a very poor state, but a lot of that is down to the workload of the caseload of the actual people working there. So to me, there weren't enough people on the ground doing the job. So why bring in a manager? Instead, you can maybe bring a manager in, or you could maybe bring in 3 or 4 posts to be doing the job on the ground.
Well, I think you'll discover this afternoon that, as well as the manager, we'll be employing more social workers in children's services next year in order to deal with that workload pressure. It still may not be enough. There will still be people saying, it's still not enough. But we are making that investment. We're spending £7.3 million more next year on social services than we're spending at the moment. 4.9 million more on schools. So the investment in our children is the highest priority, and it's well above what we've been asked to do by Welsh Government.
Right, then I'm going to take very quickly 30 seconds. There was an article in the Echo last night saying that you had changed your minds on a few things. Just answer me yes, no, or I can't tell you. Flathome Island, is it going to stay open for another summer?
I can't tell you.
Okay. The lawn bowls clubs, is the closure going to be put on hold?
Can't tell you.
Okay. Plasnewydd Community Hall, will it remain open for another 6 months while you search for another group to run it?
Can't tell you.
Okay. Spice, the after school and holiday place centre, will remain open?
Can't tell you.
Okay. A Disabled Play Project will have its funding actually boosted.
Can't tell you.
Okay. Cardiff Riding School will stay open for another year, but you are seeking a third party to take it over.
Can't tell you.
Okay.
And the reason I can't tell you is because convention tells me that I have to tell the council first, and it would be a huge act of disrespect to the council if I made those statements in the media before I went to the chamber to make my budget statement.
Okay.
So it's no offence to you, but it is an act of respect to elected councillors.
Okay, well, thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
It's certainly been interesting. Unfortunately, we have run out of time. We've got Sam Shorty up next, and I can't wait to the council meetings
4:30. Yeah.
Okay.
You don't have to come.
No, well, I do know there will be quite a crowd of people down there because is a demonstration planned for 3:30 for people to arrive down there.
And it's absolutely right that people should exercise their democratic right to make their voice heard, and it's our role this afternoon to make sure that the voices of all those people that can't turn up are heard as well.
Okay then. Right. So I can't wait for the news later on today.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
You're listening to the news, views, interviews on Radio Cardiff. Yeah.
Radio Cardiff.